Hi everybody, welcome to Zealzaddy. This is StoryTalk, our D&D or TTRPG talk show. Tonight we're doing a world-building roundtable. So we've gathered together some amazing world builders making cool product and brought them together to answer questions and chat about world building, which is one of my secret loves. No, it's not actually secret. I talk about it all the time. I love world building and I love seeing other people do cool world building. So this is our first world building roundtable, as a matter of fact. So it's only questions about TTRPG world building to help you build better worlds. If you have questions tonight, just drop them in chat. Use questions, either all caps or not. It won't matter, so that I'll see them more easily in the chat, and I'll bring them up. What else? Let's just get them on because I'm boring and they're cool. Let's get this going. All right. So we have 4 world builders here tonight. I'm going to let them go around the circle. Let's start with Diogo and go around clockwise, and then say who you are, where they can find you, interesting things you're doing, and something about yourself. All right, Diogo.
Hey everyone. My name is Diogo Nogueira. I'm from Brazil. I'm an artist and game designer, and currently I'm working on a game called Primal Quest, which is like sword and sorcery in a mythical prehistoric age, and inspired by actually prehistory and fiction around it. And I'm actually studying a lot of prehistory of South America to insert some of it on my mythical prehistory setting. So maybe I'll talk about this here. You can find me at Twitter and Facebook, Diogo_old skull, like not like old and not the place you go to study, but the bone inside your head. So old skull. So that's me. Thank you.
Like a fossil.
Yeah.
Okay, Candy.
Hi, yes, I'm Candy Williams. You can find me on Twitter at Candy_Janine. That's KANDI_JEANNE. I'm also at Dicey Amazons as well. I am a game designer, settings writer, professional playtester, and a TTRPG streamer. I am the executive producer for the Dicey Amazons, as well as the game master for several games that we play on that channel. And oh my goodness, what else? I'm currently working as a settings writer for PubCop Games on the Confluence RPG. So you'll hear a little bit about that, and then probably some about some of the personal projects that I have going as well.
Awesome. And Chris.
My name is Christopher Robin Negelein, and yes, I am named after that character. I also go by Ganza Gaming, especially in Cypher system RPG circles, where I've done lots of community content, including several mini settings. Currently, right now, people may be hearing my name because I now have a successfully funded Kickstarter for the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, which is a mashup of cosmic horror meets bureaucratic satire, so like the Laundry Files or the Parana RPG. And I love world building. It's one of my, we'll get more into it down the road, but it's something I've done for a very long time.
Awesome. All right, and Matteo.
Hello, I'm Matteo. You might know me as the Milk Boy, as I go by nowadays. I'm currently just a indie game developer at the moment. I haven't done as much as all these people have. I'm pretty new to the scene. I make a game called Camp Cryptid. Version 1 is available on my itch.io. But I'm currently working on the version 2, which will be much more improved. You can find me at Certified Milk Boy on Twitter. That's certified with a Y because spelled correctly, it didn't fit. Yeah.
All right. So the way this works, once again, I have a bunch of questions. If you have any questions, just drop them in, but use the word questions so that I can see it in chat. Let's just get started. So I'm gonna start with an easy one. This is like the lob. How much time in a week do you spend world building versus, say, game mastering or playing, on world building? And whoever wants to jump in first can jump in. Everyone else can join in after.
I'll go.
Okay.
For me personally, most of my prep is just world building. So when I'm setting up a game, it's like that week of setting it up, that's all like world building, NPC creating, mission crafting. And then it's just like, all right, now I have a session for 3 hours where that whole week of work goes into.
Nice. So you get a lot of time in. What games, by the way, do you like running?
Mainly I run like random indie one shots on like that I find on itch.io, but if we're gonna go with something more mainstream, I do like Fate Core and a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse stuff.
Nice. Love that. Anyone else want to hop in on their world building time?
For me, because I am on the actual settings team for Confluence, and contracted to work, a number of hours per week, I do quite a bit of world building.
Cool.
So between that and my personal projects, I'm probably upwards of maybe 12 to 15 hours of world building a week. Yeah.
Beautiful. That's cool. And before I get to you, Chris, how did the world building for Confluence, did it have like a ramp up period where it was a lot more or a lot less and it's built up to this, or it's come down to this?
So Confluence started a bit differently. We weren't starting from a brand new like slate. The project owner actually had been working on the world for about 15 or 16 years, since they were a teenager. And they actually had like crowdfunded some stuff a couple of times, and they wanted to sort of give it to other people to help expand it and bring more like voices into it. And so like we basically started off from the previous two versions, like looking through all of that, seeing, okay, probably should take this out, let's add this, let's do this. And so that part took a while because it was a lot of material. They're an excellent writer, and they write a lot, and so it was a lot of material to go through. But now that we're past that, we've done that for, I guess, the whole world. Now we're at the point where we're digging into each of the specific regions and filling all of that stuff in with new stuff, on top of, that what we had before.
Cool. Nice. Chris, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go on.
Oh no, you're fine. Right now it's a little flip-flopped because of the Kickstarter I'm working on, and some current projects, so I'm not world building as much as I usually do. And also I'm lucky that I'm not being the forever GM this time in our local RPG group. I'm actually getting to play. Yay. But I'm always doodling. I always have a notebook or piece of paper with me all the time, and so even like on my lunch breaks, I'm putting something down and building things.
Yeah, in the second half, we'll show some of your doodles. You send me some that I can show off, and everyone will get to see what the oldest school of old school world building looks like. Lined paper, writings.
I have some
doodles. Perfect.
Oh, nice.
That's what world building looks like until you get World Anvil. And then
I still do some of that, trust me. And then it goes into World Anvil.
And what about you, Diogo? How much time do you spend a week?
Yeah, not much. I mean, I'm kind of been recovering from like a burnout, and I have a day job, and then have to take my kids to school, and I have had a hard time working on RPG stuff lately. But I'm like working slowly on some Primal Quest archetypes, like for like a bigger version of the game, and but I'm like I still read about stuff, so for me it's still like world building. I'm like studying, as I said, like South American prehistory and like watching prehistoric planets and reading fiction and reading material for that and taking some notes. I always like I use my phone for taking notes, those like OneNote apps. So I'm always taking notes of ideas I have, and but as I said, I use it when I have more time. Like I have like a notebook where I develop more stuff for the setting, and even like dungeons and stuff with like fold outs maps. But lately it's been kind of hard, you know. But for now, probably I'm working like maybe 3 hours per week on stuff, on world building, like actually writing, but you know.
How much were you spending when you were first creating Primal Quest, though?
You know, I suffer from anxiety, but I think I was a little bit obsessed. I was working too much on RPG stuff, and like in the first year of the pandemic, I have 5 games that I have already written, but haven't been published because like writing like a maniac. So, but then I was neglecting other stuff of my life and everything went like in a crisis. So now I'm starting to get back on the horse, you know.
Cool. All right. So my next question is the stupidest one of the night, probably. What would the FBI, or in whatever the Brazilian equivalent is, think of your browser history from world building?
I think they're okay. I mean, yeah, I don't use the internet so much for that. I use like Pinterest to like get images and stuff and like look for maps. But I mostly look for like books and read about it, or maybe like a series, or yeah, I don't know. I don't look into too much weird stuff later, especially because maybe of the prehistoric themes. I look for history or things about native people or like civilizations or animals and
yeah, yours is tame.
Like
That's
that.
True. I'm not sure everybody's is as tame as that.
Yeah, that I feel they'll probably think there's at least 20 different people using this computer at this point with like, because I've done several projects that are just not at all similar. And so, I mean, for Confluence, like one of the things that is like heavily in the game is like funguses and molds and like all these little things. And so like you're looking for like the most deadly fungus and like all these different things. And it's just like,
oh, so you're on the
okay.
CDC watch list, not the FBI watch list.
Probably FBI as well. But yeah, it's so varied that yeah, they have to think that there's at least 20 different people using this computer because no one person could be interested in this many different things.
Matteo, you look like you're having trouble figuring out how to answer this without getting into more trouble with the FBI.
I don't think. I don't know. I don't think they'd be too worried. I don't feel like I research that much strange stuff. I mean, maybe they'll be like, "Hey, this guy's really into some conspiracy stuff." Since like my game currently is a lot of cryptid stuff, so maybe that. But otherwise, I don't think there would be a lot of. I don't think they'd be too worried.
I know as a game master, I've looked up almost every kind of weapon there that has ever been made. Bombs.
Yeah.
Not personally making them, but just looking at it, kind of like you find things you shouldn't be finding probably.
Traps.
Traps, poisons, just crazy stuff. And one day I was thinking,
having to Google how a C4 works because I don't think the player understands the explosion of a C4.
I always think the FBI must have like a little switch that says, watch list, game master instead. Like it's a game master, not somebody put on the watch list or something. A world builder.
They squint real close, and you're like, how to make bomb, and they're like, wait, and then it's like in Cyberpunk Red, and it's like,
Yes,
oh,
exactly.
okay.
Okay, they give it a little thumbs up icon. He's good. He's okay.
FBI agent, before I answer your question, does this involve a murder? Because if it doesn't, we can talk about my internet history. Weapons, poisons. Yeah, a few conspiracies in there, you know.
Yeah, there's just crazy stuff you look up when you're researching games, either for running them or world building. And I always think it's funny. There, you know how they do those Venn diagrams? I'm sure there's a Venn diagram with like serial killers and game masters with this little sliver in the middle that is the research. Yeah. You know.
Well, Mr. FBI supervisor, we've only the blueprints we found on Mr. Negelein's computer are all related to castles and dungeons. So I think we're good.
Yeah. So what are some settings or genres that you find particularly difficult to world build for? I think some people are better at certain things than others, and some people just either due to lack of interest or they just find it complex or something. I don't know. Are there any genres or settings you find problematic in working on for any reason?
For me, like Victorian era stuff, like historic 1950s, because it's always in the perspective of a culture that I'm not familiar with.
Imperialist. It's almost always imperialist.
I mean, like nowadays, like we already colonized it, so we are familiar with like American like daily lives, but like I don't know, like in the 50s or you know, like historic in 1920s Call of Cthulhu, I have no like familiarity with this, you know. Or like Victorian era, we're not part of like our culture, even here like in media or stuff.
Yeah.
Anything kind of historic is probably a little harder because you have to know about the history, and so there's a lot of research into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that's not fake, anything that's not like a fantasy world that I've made up that I know everything about in my head is more difficult than if I just know what's happening.
Yeah. Like I think one thing I found that I think is very interesting in settings is, and Diogo was talking about is, for instance, science fiction often is the alternative history. Tales for the Loop is an alternative history of the 1980s, where the science leapt forward and we had robots living amongst us and things like that. But if you're of a certain age, you will have known about the 80s enough that it's an easy no. But
like
say
for
the
us,
1940s, there aren't many people that lived in the 40s that are running games currently, I imagine.
So,
like
so
the
I have
80s,
two... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Like the 80s for like the Stranger Things stuff wasn't like this was here in Brazil, but we are familiar because of the media, and we are already familiar with this, so that's kind of easier, you know.
For me, there's two settings that are a challenge. One is Weird or Wild West, because I see when people do it, they go straight for the low-hanging fruit that is just not right these days, you know. So because I'm trying to find a way to get those elements and those flavors that would deliver that experience, but without all of the, you know, stuff that people would or automatically do, like putting elves into Victorian outfits and sombreros on orcs and things like that. You know, I want to find a way to get the good stuff without, you know, people giving people an excuse to do those sort of things. And the other one I think is science fiction, because you know, we talked about history, and part of history is, you know, we talk about magic, but we don't talk about occultism, and nobody really researches occultism. So from our perspectives, when we talk about magic, oh, magic, that's fine. But we talk about science fiction. We know science. We've had science classes. So everybody wants to pick science apart. So unless it's Star Wars or Star Trek, which has a lot of unspoken agreements, like you're not going to play an Imperial squad, or in a Star Wars game, you're going to play the good guys. But and for my answer to that is, if you knew occultism as well as you knew science stuff, you'd be picking apart the occultism too. So it's more of a perspective of trying to get some science fiction people aren't going to have to ask 20 questions about. Just my 2 cents.
Candy?
Yeah, I think think I'm with Matteo on sort of the real world settings can be sort of an issue, like especially the earlier ones, right? Because even in Karma City, it's an alternate universe, but like that it strays from the actual like timeline, and I think I've kind of changed it a couple times, but it's either like the late 80s or the early 90s at this point. And so it's again it kind of the same thing that you said with the Tales from the Loop. It's a little easier because we do have people, of course, that are alive that have been playing those games at those times, but earlier eras is a lot harder to make sure you're getting right without a whole lot of research, because people will come for you. If you get stuff wrong, people will come for you.
even you bring up people come for you, even like already existing IPs, if you're like role playing in something that exists and you get a little thing wrong.
Yeah. A big one on that, I think, actually is any of the Cthulhu mythos stuff. It's in the public domain, but there are a lot of people who know just a tremendous amount about it, and if you get it wrong, they're all over you about it. So the only way to avoid it is use it as inspiration, maybe. I think, rather than try and use Nyarlathotep directly from it, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
There's a good podcast as a resource for that. Ken and Robin talk about stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're all knee deep in the Yellow King and Delta Green and Knights Black Agents, and they get into historical stuff and then say, here's how we spin it to turn it into a gameable thing.
Yeah, they do great work. Ken Hite is an amazing creator. He's won Ennies, a tremendous both world builder and setting creator. He's in Chicago. He goes to some of the cons. I know that. So, I met him down here once in Miami, and I think that he's pretty brilliant. And he knows he's brilliant. Like, he knows he's smart. So, it's always good to have smart. Honestly, to me, I want to have everybody in the room be smarter than me. It makes me feel like I can elevate myself more and learn. There's always things to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're starting a new setting. What's your personal starting point?
For me, it's like defining like what would be the core characteristics of the setting, like the themes of the setting, so I can start thinking about how I would reflect that on the setting itself, places, factions, and people, and things like that. Like it's gonna be a setting, it's gonna be a game about conflicts or between, I don't know, society, about religion and some other issue, So that's what I usually do with my games.
Okay.
My baselines are usually if I get too into a particular piece of media. So like for Camp Cryptid, when I was doing that, it was because I was playing a lot of Monster Prom. I don't know if you've heard of that video game.
Awesome.
It's a video game. It's like a dating sim. you date monsters.
That's super cool. Oh my god, I gotta write that down.
Quick addendum for that. It's called Monster Prob. There's 3 of them now. But yeah, I was playing a lot of that, and I was like, I like this whole silly, goofy horror comedy setting, and I want to do something like that. And so I start there for a baseline. It's usually just based off of things I read or watch or see, pretty much, because nothing's made in a vacuum. I take inspiration from a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
true. I think it's interesting that you find your initial starting point is in current media you're experiencing in whatever way. I've not heard of another world builder that's their starting point. I'm sure that there are others that do it, but that's the first time I've heard it. And I think it's really an interesting nexus point for the building of something. It's cool.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
For me, it's I guess a bit of what Diogo said, starting sort of with a theme, and then figuring out where you want to place that theme, so where it fits for what, like, the type of game that you want to play, and so after that, like, that location comes first, and then after that it sort of builds for the people and everything, because that location sort of informs, like, for me, everything else. And so, yeah, it's theme, location, and then it kind of spiders out. It could at that point it could kind of go anywhere, but no.
Yeah. And Chris?
So Matteo and I have something in common, but in addition to what I'm what I'm kind of soaking in now, I used to be a big watching television. I used to be a really big reader back in the day. And I'm an omnivore with that. I mean, most people go, "You watch that?" And I said, "I kind of enjoy it on a certain level." And they're like, "Oh, it's awful." And I'm like, "But there's this kind of cool thing." So all of that is like this constant churning stew in the back of my skull. And one thing will ping off another thing, and I'll be like, "Oh, okay, well, that was cool," or "This thing I'm doing is cool." And then, "But what about this?" And then they kind of mix in together. And then it just kind of depends on whether that really hits me and whether I can see that there's like, oh, that's not going to work, or, oh, this might have a thing, and where are the themes? They may come into it. Or sometimes it's just like there's a setting. I'm like, it could be changed a little bit to make it kind of better. Like a perfect example, one of my, I don't even want to call it personal projects for forever is a Spelljammer homage, because for those who may or may not know, Spelljammer was, actually probably everybody does know, because WotC came out with a Spelljammer book, right? The original was very much wanted to be everything to everyone, which maybe is something we need to talk about when it comes to making settings, especially for commercial projects.
Yeah, it was kind of a meta setting, right?
Yeah, it was a meta setting, but it wanted to be Master and Commander, kind of naval adventures / tactical, and wanted to be swashbuckling, which is a much more narrative thing. Those two things kind of clash with each other. You don't usually get Master and Commander with swashbuckling. So I was like, that's what I felt like Spelljammer needed, was it needed a version that kind of put the focus on one or the other and then go from there. Yeah. And all those requirements, I picked swashbuckling, and all those requirements to make the swashbuckling work. By the time I was done, I had my own adjacent but very different Spelljammer setting.
Yeah, cool. That thing you said about like current media influence, it's totally true. Like Primal Quest was born like while I was watching Primal from Jandis Tarkovsky, and it has a bit of stuff influence from, I was watching The Flash, the TV series, and The Walking Dead too. Like how everything like mixed it together, and with my passion with dinosaurs and sword and sorcery literature. So it's everything like together. Like as you said, I'm a really big fan of that book called Still Like an Artist. Nothing's original. Like we're always like recycling and infusing with some of our own experience. We're incapable of making like copies, so it's okay for influence. It won't be a copy anyway, even if you try to make one, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like those themes, like those additional themes come from like all the stuff that you take in. So, because yeah, definitely. You were talking about like where your stuff for Primal came from, but for Carver City, mine came from sort of Little Red Riding Hood plus Arrow. Plus some
Nice.
other, yeah, like some other, and a bunch of like a few other
Yeah,
things, like Dresden
absolutely.
Files, and just like yeah, and so
And probably stuff you
Fuck
can't
the big
remember,
guy-
right?
the big
Probably
bad
exactly
other
stuff you can't
can't
remember. Absolutely.
I mean, it's interesting. It leads to into one of the questions I had, which is: are you inspired by real life history and culture and mythology in your settings, or is it completely?
Everything mixed together, you know.
Yeah. Even
Some
if you
people
don't
are,
know
real
it.
some people
stuff.
aren't, or
Because
don't want to.
because real stuff is the inspiration for the fictitious stuff. So you can find really, really strange real stuff looking like, especially like prehistory and civilizations, like I know it's like it's cookie, and like there's like this series on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse. It's like it's a journalist that's not a historian, but like he looks into real archaeological stuff and making like his theories about it. I don't want to get into if it's real or not, but for game inspiration, it's fantastic, you know. Like but there's really strange stuff that's really ancient when we were like hunters and gatherers, and people built stuff aligned with the skies and aligned with older constructions thousands of years ago, like in the same line, and it's aligned with the sun in the equinox and stuff. So there's really mythical and strange stuff in the real, but as fiction, there's always you can go sideways too, right? So I always mix the two together, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a game that I've been working on, a personal game called Briarbound, and that one is completely it's based off of the African folktale of Brer Rabbit. And
cool.
so using that and using like actual like history and locations from Africa, because that's where the folktale is from. So doing a lot of research on that and bringing that into the game. Absolutely.
Yeah. Matteo, Chris, what about
And
you?
then of course,
Do you pull
Sorry,
those
there's a lot of
influences?
explosions outside of my house right now.
Oh shit!
Like someone's got a firecracker or something. Anyway, yeah, I want to say I do probably take more from like fiction, but also like I probably take a lot from like history without even knowing it, because like Diogo said, like everything is usually based off of historical things. So, and even things that I read about history or have learned, I usually just subconsciously enter that into my things.
Yeah. And Chris, what about you?
I feel like we've come right back around. What was the question again?
Are you inspired by and incorporate real life history and culture and mythology into your settings?
I wish I did that more obviously. I feel like it's a little more on the subconscious level. But that's mostly because there's a lot of like Spelljammer and the some of the other settings I've worked with, weren't as connected. I'm helping out with the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, because that is based kind of like in an alternate reality. Yeah. And while the artist Trevor Roberts is the mastermind behind it, there's some things I'm kind of adding, just even based off my personal life. Like an example, I talk about how the past is reducing the brain drain out of rural America and putting it back to America, because a lot of rural towns, the smart kids, they go off to college and they never come back.
Yeah.
They go where they can make money.
Yep. So I know all of you didn't start out as the first world builder. So who are your mentors or favorite people that you've learned from along the way that really gave you inspiration, guidance, what have you, towards becoming a world builder? I'll leave the question to that. I don't want to extrapolate. I don't want to add to it. I think it's a good, clear question. It's your chance to throw out those cool names of people and thank them, even.
I'll jump in if people don't mind. For a good 15 years before, 20 years before I got into doing this for tabletop, I was trying to break into the traditional fiction racket. Mm-hmm. Scott will know because Scott knew me back then.
Yeah.
So I was inspired by a lot of the science fiction and fantasy authors everybody probably knows. Some of those names are probably fading, especially Roger Zelazny, who was a wonderful world builder and could just riff off things. In addition to that, I was also in a really great writer's workshop for 10 years. Adam Troy Castro was a mentor of mine, and he has made some pretty crazy little worlds. So I'll pass on the mic to the next person.
I guess I would say, like, I didn't really work with anybody. Like, I started and I simply made a game, like, because other people were making, like, at Google Plus times, I think DCC really inspired me because it was a game, like, everybody was making their own stuff, and it was a game made with many gaps in it, and actually said in the game, we're leaving this blank for you to fill making stuff. And this kind of grew like a zine society around it, and we started like just making stuff. So, and then I started seeing other people like making small games like the Black Hack, and then people like creating settings for this, like this indie stuff, and setting a bunch of tables for people to generate stuff, for it not to be like a setting that you just read, memorize, and try to play. Oh, on this street there is this and that. So on this city, this is happening, and like a stable thing. It was settings that were meant for you to have the book on the table, and if you players get to that city, you roll tables on that city, and that's what's happening there. It's not something that it's fixed. So like Hurubris from Mike Evans, a fantastic setting that inspired me to make settings like this, and even like DCC Lancamer has always tables for you to generate stuff. And so this OSR culture of zines and toolkits instead of like guidebooks, like tourist guidebooks, was what really teach me how to do world building the way I do world building, which is like defining core characteristics and main regions, and then putting tables and then for you to generate some locations and factions, or even defining factions for you to generate what's happening and make it like random and something for you to use on the table instead of reading, and trying to memorize. So I think it was just copying the work of others that I thought was making great work. So yeah.
Personally, I am the youngest of 4 boys, two of my older brothers are like writers. They do a lot of writing. My oldest brother is a really good writer. It's like very, very good. He went to school for all that. He knows what he's doing. Mostly then, I get a lot of my love of fiction and writing and world building from them. They have helped me a lot with all of many little projects that I never like put anywhere, that were just for myself.
Nice.
Also, like a lot of teachers in high school who saw like how much I liked writing and nurtured that, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's where most of my inspiration comes from. And then there's things like, the media I consume, of course. I just like the worlds there, and I want to make worlds like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all have a couple of at least one of those. If you're a creative, there's some teacher back there that really like just empowered you in ways that only a teacher can. I don't want to say most teachers, because I don't think most teachers do that for most students, but I think every teacher does it for some students. Like I had one named Jean Rudolph. If you're out there, thank you. Who was an amazing teacher. She was my biology teacher in 8th grade. Reignited my love of science, even though I loved it, but I was kind of traumatic events happened right before that, and I was kind of on a decline for a little while, and she kind of reignited that. And I think there's always there's an amazing teacher out there for almost everybody. At least I hope. What about you, Candy?
Yeah, actually, I will add to that. I've always been an avid reader since I was a very little kid, and so I was always reading books. Like I'd go through like a summer, reading like 60 books, in early high school. When I was in 11th grade, I had an English teacher, and I would read some science fiction, but not a lot. But I'd write like science fiction type stuff. And an 11th grade teacher made a note, because we had to journal. We had to do like a journaling at the first 5-10 minutes of class, each class, and because she would ask a question, so a prompt, and then we'd have to journal on it. And so one of them was about, I guess, like what you like to read or whatever. And I'd written something and was like, oh, I'd like to get into more science fiction. And so she got me into Octavia Butler.
Awesome writer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And so that was like sort of like one of my first, like, okay, like these worlds are pretty cool. And then getting into, like, as I got older, some Laurel K. Hamilton, so a lot of fiction, science fiction books and things like that. But as far as like TTRPG people, like for more recent, because I've only really been writing, I've been GMing for years, but like actually like writing worlds and stuff like that, outside of that, it's only been like 2.5 years. And so Chris Spivey for Haunted West, I'm very much into like the research and getting into, like I said, alternate universe, so getting into the real stuff, but then putting my own twist onto it. And then I got in late last year, like the Coyote and Crow books, and things like that. And so just really getting into those books and those writers that are really integrating like real culture into like sci-fi, magical horror, wherever they're going with it. Like I just like love that integration and how they go about it.
I think Neil Gaiman does a great job with that kind of stuff. I love all of their books. I think they make some amazing pieces that are very inspirational to me. Comics and novels, what have you.
I'm going to throw one more suggestion there. Jade City by Fonda Lee is also great. She mashes up wire fu with The Godfather.
Nice. It's funny. One thing that I found that I was having trouble with was I was not organized enough for my own head. Like I would just have pages of stuff and there was no real organization to it. So I bought this book from James D'Amato. Let me see what's there.
Oh yeah.
Game Master World Building Guide. Highly recommended. Very cheap.
Yeah, it's good.
$20 or something, or maybe less. Yeah, $15. $14.99 on Amazon. I don't know what it is in Brazilian dollars though.
No, yeah, we can only get that in Amazon here, but it's always on sale. So it's a good one. Yeah,
it helped me reorganize my thought process when I'm building something. So
yeah, I'm always reading like stuff about creativity and even like world building for like fiction, because like I kind of want to try fiction someday, but like I always read about it. But it always helps with world building for games too, right? So it's always good to study.
All right. We're about halfway through. Why don't we take a short break? I'll run the intermission. During the intermission, I'll be showing Kickstarters that are running or upcoming, including one for someone on the panel tonight. Chris has his Kickstarters in the last 3 days, so if you want to go check it out, you should actually, even if you don't want to, just go check it out. It's amazing, and you should back it. It's very cool. He's got one stretch goal left, and honestly, he's killing it. It's a great idea, beautifully put together. I hope you find it interesting and exciting. And if not that, there's going to be a bunch of other things showing. So we will see you in a few minutes. We'll be right back, everybody.
From that area.
Actually, Joe, give me 1 second. I did not have the mic on there, so let me restate the question so everyone will hear it again. So okay. when you're world building, and I'll cut that out of the YouTube side. Oh, you guys moved. Hold on. I also have to move some people. Yeah. I don't know whether it was you or whether the cameras moved for a moment. All right. Candy's not in the right place. I hate it when people end up moving. Now you're good. Oh, so the question is, how much time or how do you sort and break down the things that you like to work on? What are your favorite things to work on, your least favorite things to work on? And how do you break down your time and your effort? And, I have some examples, but there's obviously more that you could think of that I didn't put in here. History and lore, philosophy and psychology, daily conditions of living in the world, belief and science, magic and similar concepts like occultism, important people and NPCs, government organizations and conspiracies, equipment and money, flora, fauna, and monstra, and then the player's relationships to the world, which to me, that's the part at the end that's important for aligning the characters to the world they're about to play in, like in a session 0. So I'll let you guys break it down how you like, how you feel best about it.
Well, I think there's different things. Like for me, important stuff to work on for me will always be stuff that the players can interact with. Like I don't see like really much of a point like to develop like a long history and backstory of something that the players will likely never interact with or know about. So I always try to make a point to develop as much as I need, or as much as the players need to know and can interact with and make choices about, and not like spend too much time like creating and thinking about things they like. It's only important for the backstory of the stuff that is happening, So, but the things I like to develop are like societies, locations, and relations between these societies. I think, in the context of the setting. So, the geography will be important and stuff like this. But for me, it's always like about relations between like factions or something, because I think that's where the players can just get in the middle and see where they want to go, who they want to support, or what they think is important there.
It definitely depends on the type of game, because for Briar Brown it's a small game, so even though like I use sort of the inspiration of the Brer Rabbit folklore, the world building actually comes from the players. So I give you a location, or the game gives you a location, and the players build it out in that game. But for like Confluence or Karma City, those I probably touch on the majority of your lists there, because those are much bigger games, definitely more involved, and it fills out the world a little bit better. Now, the difference between those two games is that Confluence is set in a completely new world. It's not related really to Earth or anything like that. And so we have to go a little bit deeper into that because you don't have sort of that previous knowledge of the world. Where Karma City, it's an alternate reality. And so you do have some previous knowledge, so you don't have to go into as much detail for that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I actually, one of the things that I was going to ask later was like what do you see as the difference between a big and a small setting, and how do you reorganize based on what you're building? Because I knew the list was bigger than a lot of games would use. Small games are, the more local and tiny it gets, the fewer of these things that matter to the players because they're not going to see them. But if you're building giant settings of whole worlds or countries or what have you, there's a lot of detail that players potentially will touch on. So, what about you, Matteo? Chris?
I definitely work more in smaller settings, but I think usually what I do is I start with the important people and the NPCs and such, and that kind of builds into like the governments and conspiracies, because certain people might be part of those things, and then that kind of goes into like the history and lore, because based off of their motivations are driven by whatever the lore of this place is, and then that all goes into the players' relationships with the world. So my world building usually always starts with the people in it, rather than starting with the world and building the people, putting the people in. I put the people first and then build the world around the people, if that makes sense.
Right. Chris?
So for me,
Yeah.
it depends on what kind of really got me excited. So it might be one of these subjects, not necessarily all of them. And then, and just whatever kind of gets my juices going, because for a lot of these settings, you're going to be with it for a while. So you need to find something that keeps your interest going. But I want to jump in here because I know, especially for one particular strain of gamer, they keep wanting to go to these things and say it increases realism. It's realistic. I'm being a simulationist. I'm being realistic. I would like to politely disagree and say, no, you are aiming for vermicitude, and that is a totally different beast. You're aiming for the feeling that it's a living or breathing or realistic world. But that, especially when you're doing a role-playing game, there's no way you can make it really realistic without the wheels coming off very soon on your project. And then, especially for like a commercial project, the player's relationship to the world has to really, at some point, come to the forefront. Because I have read some really fantastic world settings, and when I put the book down and I look at it, I'm like, where do I game? How do I game? What's the thing that's, what's going to make this my elevator pitch to get my players to do it? Because there'll be a great world, but it's just not obvious what we should be doing and interacting with it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm gonna use that as a jump off point for a question about your own systems, your own worlds. So, what do you think is what do you think? You're the world builder. What is the major conceit of the project you're working on right now? What are the things people would want to do in your world? Which should, I assume, lead to how you world build it.
Well, in Primal Quest, for example, it's a world that it's changing and like different potation cataclysms are happening, and the players have to make a choice there. Are they just gonna try to get power and things they want while the world is potentially changing forever, or they're gonna try to maybe unite the people that are divided and try to make something to turn the tides and maybe understand what is changing or not. So that's and the setting does this because like one of the initial things of the game is like going through a like a rite of passage in a cavern and kind of introduce some parts of the story, and it's a tribe that welcomes different people, and you start to hear stuff that is changing and happening, and the setting has all just signs of things that are going to happen to shakes the status quo and force people to make harsh decisions, so.
for Camp Cryptid, a lot of the, like what you said, the main thing players are going to want to do is investigate and explore, because there's an air of mystery in the air of what's going on here, and where are these monsters coming from? Are they even real? Can we find them? It's so the it comes from, like, you want players to have fun investigating, then you need to make a world where strange things aren't exactly normal, but they can be explained, if that makes sense. Because if you want players to do one thing, investigate, and then you don't give them mysteries to investigate, if you don't make a world where there's a lot of mysteries, it's not going to be fun to investigate in that world. So there's a lot of spookiness and eeriness to go into that, and like putting in little breadcrumbs and clues, and making sure there's logic to what's happening, rather than just like, well, it's magic, so it works like that, because that's never good to just like write something off as like it just happens, you know.
Yeah. So I guess in your world building, there were probably, I imagine there's a lot of skill tests of some kind as far as mystery solving, or is it mostly you thinking through the problems?
So yeah, there's probably a little bit of both. You have action checks, where you draw a card if you want to know if you know something, and your stats are based off of suits, and if your suit is in the right, you don't want to draw based on something that isn't in your like suit, because you might not get what you expect. So yeah, there's suit, a lot of
suit being like the
like card
deck
suit.
of card suits.
Yes.
Yeah, just want to make sure people understand. I knew that because you'd said that earlier. So make sure anyone who's joined later and understand what that means.
Sorry.
You don't have to wear a suit and tie. It's not like cosplay, the worst job you've ever gone to.
You have to wear a suit in my game. You have to.
Cool.
For Confluence, the big thing about Confluence is that it is an era that has pooled people, places, and things from the past and the future into this one era, and so it's been happening over thousands of years in this era. And so with this one, whether you're playing someone who has been recently pulled from your era or someone that's been there for a while, it's still a whole new world, and it's a pretty large world. And so you are just, you're playing this group of people trying to find a way to live in this world and also understand all of these new things that you've never seen before. And so you've got people coming from very low technology, people coming from very high technology, and like almost full cities being pulled with all the people and the things in it into this world. And so, you can go to the city and just have never seen the lineages that might be there,
Wow, that's
all that
exciting.
stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
That's one reason why I really love this project, is because it's just an interesting premise. But like everything can be new to you, and so figuring out how to just live in this world and get around is just a really big part of it.
Nice. Very cool. That actually reminds me of, there was a game that came out in the 90s, and they're just now getting ready to release a second version called Blue Planet. Mm-hmm. And it was humans discover a new world. There's no way of getting back home because it's like, centuries of travel to get there. Mm-hmm. And they have to make it work. And it's like a planet completely covered in water. Mm-hmm. There's flora and fauna in it, but there's none of the stuff you're used to as humans on Earth. So they have to actually force evolve themselves to the point that they can survive in a water world, basically. Mm-hmm. I think it's very interesting, but it's not pulling all these things into it. It's just they discovered it, and there's no way of going back. And I thought, I don't know why that reminded me of it, but it was interesting because they had to find a way. It was a survival kind of game with sci-fi and even horror elements, light horror, I guess, elements. It's cool. What about you, Chris?
So for Mystery Flesh Pit, people have asked me, well, what can you do? It's just this thing that's sitting in Texas as a national park or a tourist attraction.
You can fill out forms.
And of course fill out forms. And I was like, what can you not do? For me, I actually starting to go down rabbit holes as I was thinking about it. Essentially, in a way, it's just kind of a reframing of like Call of Cthulhu with a different, elder. Instead of an elder god, you've got this cosmic horror. So I had to narrow down and say, okay, people, I'm going to give you 3 frameworks and things to coach and for you to see how you can use the game system to do these 3 flavors. And one is like you're basically a park employee for like the National Park Service, and you're trying to fill out your paperwork and not have park guests get eaten and be weirdly blasé about it. Or special contractors where you're the veil-out team. Somebody drank a little too much Heartthrob Cola and had a side effect that made them a ravening monster, and now you've just kind of, nothing to see here, folks, and fill out paperwork.
I got to tell you, ever since you told me about what your launch was, I looked at the website and I started imagining, God, there was a movie in the 60s, like an old sci-fi movie, where they entered like the blood and body of a human, and I was like, that would be cool because it's a giant bodies in the earth. It'd be cool to enter the body of this thing and as scientists and try and study and research it while the body's trying to defend itself against you. It's like, oh, that's
exactly.
Cool. Like
Inner Voyages,
blood,
I think is what it was called.
In the flesh of it, because it's just gigantic. It's so massive. I thought, there'd be something very cool there. Well, I don't remember what the name of that movie was. It was really famous in the 60s.
One was Inner Voyages. One was
where they shrunk
Voyage.
them down to size and they injected them into the bloodstream to find the disease, to take it out, whatever it was.
And there's a whole team of scientists. And the third framework is basically because your family's been living by this thing for generations, or something got spilled on you at work. You're cursed with some sort of crazy mutant power, and you're going to end up on the dissection table. So you're like, you and a bunch of other people are fugitives. We're trying to run away, doing the whole kind of Stranger Things vibe of being chased down.
Oh, by the way, Candy has a Kickstarter out now too, and I want to drop the link in. Can you want to talk about
back, Candy?
Let me explain real quick.
Been holding back?
Well, sort of. So I'm doing social media for this, but this is so the project owner for this it's a tarot Kickstarter, but it's in the same world as Confluence, like the Alley Man and the lore, and it's heavy on lore. This tarot and everything. So like it comes with books with all the lore and all that stuff, and there's like a podcast and a whole bunch of stuff, right? So the project owner owns Publishing Goblin, which does the tarots, and PubGob Games, which does, RPGs and board games. And so this Kickstarter started, was it 12 days ago? And it's at almost 500,000.
Wow, nice.
Largest one I've been involved with at any point, but it is also helping to fund sort of the rest of our TTRPG, the Confluence RPG. As well.
Does that freak you out? Does that freak you out that it hit 500,000? Is like that?
Does
it add anxiety?
It's sort of, yes, it is. Like I said, it's the biggest one I've been a part of, but this is the second tarot Kickstarter. The first one about 2 years ago did 1.4 million.
Wow.
So like surprised, but not really.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, like I said, the lore and everything, just the fans are seriously rabid over all of the lore for these worlds, and it's great.
Cool.
I love it.
All right, we did get a question in the chat, so it's an interesting question. Bend the game system to your world, or bend your world to the game system? You're hired to world build. What do you do?
I've done both.
Okay, explain. What does that mean?
Sometimes
depends on the project and also what game system you're using. I mean, a perfect example of that has been two things. Has been Esper Genesis that I worked on, but Rich Luscofair is the brainchild.
Yeah.
He is the mastermind of that. It's his brainchild.
Yeah.
Those things are now in order. And Cypher, as well as some indie stuff that I really haven't published yet. I mean, a perfect example of that is, TSR's done it for ages, where they didn't do it as elegantly, I would like to say, as Cypher, where you kind of shoehorn in a concept and use D&D to do it. But like a perfect example with Esper Genesis, there's this unobtainium called Sorium, and that's what gives everybody their abilities. You either get exposed to it, and then you get your powers, which is where your psionics comes from, or you're able to manipulate the Sorium itself as a nanotechnology that you could subconsciously use, and that's where engineers can make little nanobots that help them fix things.
Yeah.
Still uses kind of a spell point system, also uses a spell slot system.
Yeah.
But it has tweaked a world that the mechanics still make some sense with. And then with Cypher, the big thing with Cypher is you have these things called ciphers, and they're usually supposed to be something ubiquitous within the setting that kind of enhances the setting. A perfect example of that is they have a game called Gods of the Fall, where in this fantasy world, heaven has fallen, and you are the next generation of demigods, a rising divinity. And when you use a cipher, it dissipates, and that bit of dissipation is divinity going back and recreating heaven. And in my, with using the Mystery Flesh Pit, I've turned ciphers into prototypes, which is also kind of a homage to the Paranoia RPG. And basically, it is a research and development toy that you're using that will be used once, and you're just hoping it doesn't explode on you after you use it.
Right.
But on the face of it, if you can make custom rules to really bring out that incentive for the players' behaviors that you want, or that vibe and vermicitude that you want, that's really where you can get your most juice from. But that's a lot of hard work, coming up with stuff from scratch.
Yeah. What about the rest?
Everybody's nodding their head, agreeing with me.
What about the rest of you? Bend the rules or bend the setting?
I think it depends on my starting point. If I'm using a game to play in a setting that I want, then I kind of bend the game to the system. But if I'm starting with the world, I'll put it this better. If I'm starting with the world, I bend the game to the world. If I'm starting with the game and I'm just like, I want to play this game, then I bend the world to the game. I don't know if I put that right. My brain's jumbled up with that one. But yeah, it depends my starting point. If I'm playing a game that already has a lot of established lore and stuff, I'm probably gonna do less world bending than I am game bending, because the world's already there. But if I'm doing my own world, I'm probably gonna have to try to make it work within whatever game I'm playing, unless I'm doing my own kind of game.
Okay. Candy, what do you think?
It really does kind of depend on what you're doing, because I've written sort of a like an adventure hack type thing, and so I'm just going to sort of write it to the system, right? So that's more bending the world to the system. Like, as I'm writing, okay, this is the system, this is the adventure, we're going to make it work together. But I tend to I think bending systems to games more than anything. Either that or custom system. Like Confluence is a custom system.
Right.
Like, we're working right alongside the mechanics team,
Right.
for that one. For the smaller game that I did, that I have, Briarbound, for me, the theme of the game was more important to me than fitting it to a system. And so I did a lot of research on different ways or basically different games. Like I read through probably over 200 games and just kind of looking at the mechanics. I'm like, okay, can this work? Can I make this work? And so I ended up kind of mashing together a couple of different things from different types of gameplay, actually. So it wasn't all just TTRPG. It was sort of a little bit of board game mechanics, a little bit of card game mechanics, to make the system for that game. Like, in one of the hardest parts for that game was there's something called the Battle of Wits in there, and where I wanted sort of this back and forth, because Brer Rabbit is all about conflict without actual fighting, right? And so I wanted something to sort of simulate that, and came up with the Battle of Wits. And it took me a while, but I finally found something similar. And it's an old game that's made in like 2002, I think, called Spycraft. And I was able to get something from that game and kind of twist it a bit to work with Brer Rabbit.
Cool.
No Spycraft, well.
Yeah.
And Diogo, what do you
Yeah,
do?
I usually make my own games, so I probably start with the setting and then make a system around it. But sometimes this, like, coming up or reading like games and mixing things up and come up with a different system that does something strange, kind of inspires you to make a setting because of the way the rules work, and it could simulate some kind of fictional thing you come up because of that. So the other way around works too. Like a system can inspire some kind of setting for you to create too. So, but yeah, I mean, I think for me the setting always has priority. And like if this is something that would work this way in a setting, the system has to like accommodate that, because I think it's there to serve the way the setting works. And like as you said, like a very
that's
not
because
like
you're a writer.
Yeah.
That's because you're a writer. I'm not sure every person making mechanics thinks the same way. Especially if it's an established system. A big established system
sure,
is
like
going to say, whoa,
the mechanics has to be open for you to be surprised. But like, I mean, if I'm playing Star Wars and someone's used a force power like in a selfish way, they have to have some connection with the dark side or get some point or something.
Yeah.
Like it's even if it's like you're making up like a new system, like the setting works this way. If you're using this setting, it has to work this way or something like this.
What in your, I mean, all the things you've written, your world building. What is the coolest piece of world building kit you've made? Like the thing that you're like most proud of? The thing that makes you go, damn, I was on it that day or that week or that month or whatever.
I think what I would say would be like solar blades and cosmic spells, because it's the bigger ones, like a really big setting toolkit, and has this like a strong theme, but tools for you to make it your own. I plan to do that with Primal Quest, and there's a little bit of that with some of my other games, but this one's like the most extensive, and then there's some stuff written that has delved even deeper than that, like the second edition of Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells has even more word building and tools than that, but it's still like being edited and things like that. So I would say Solar Blades and Cosmic Spells. It's probably the bigger work of word building that I've completed.
What about the rest of you? That's a question for everybody, not just Diogo. Bring out your pride.
Can you repeat that question again?
Sure. What is the world building thing you're most proud of, that you think you were just killing it with the creation of whatever it is, and you just think it's the most unique, most interesting thing that you've done, that like the aspect that is just you think is the killer sauce for whatever it was?
Well, for me, it's something that I haven't released ever. It's only something that like my friends and my brothers know about because it's something I've been working on for a long time. But I have this like comic script that I've been writing for a while, and my most proud thing of that is like all of the history of superheroes in that world and how it like the catalog of like existing heroes that are already there, that are able to be explored in that series, alongside like the main characters. I think that's just so fun to do. It's just like come up with like, here's some people who were important before the story that you can learn about through the story, and that's kind of what I'm proud of, even though that's not something that's super public.
Cool. So we'll get to see it someday.
Maybe.
I hope.
Hopefully.
You can't keep something like that bottled up, you know. As a
No.
creator, it would just be so wrong for you to hide it away. What about you, Chris, Candy, and anything that comes to mind?
Two things actually
Okay.
kind of come to mind actually. So one of them,
I'd love to see all you creators blush at these questions where you have to put your ego out there.
so one thing was just released. God, was that last month? It was for for Hit Point Press. I did a big bad,
nice.
called Jamila, and ended up sort of creating like a new, what do you call it? I guess race for, it was like, because it's D&D based. Their big bads are D&D based.
Yeah.
So like a new race, and she's the fear collector, and so she actually sort of takes the fear from people and feeds on it. So kind of vampire-esque. But that project, I didn't realize, like I wrote it like actually a year ago, and it was just released. So it was something that I remembered it, but was kind of like, okay, I don't know when exactly it's coming out or whatever. But they do so much with those projects that I was just like, holy crap. So I like wrote this whole big bad, and you write kind of like their backgrounds and about their layers and their weapons and all that stuff. But then they then you get to see the art and the mini. I had no idea that there was going to be a mini for it, like custom sculpted for this. And I was just like, what? Something I have written is like out there. There's a mini for it.
Yeah, that is cool.
But the one that's, I guess, more personal to me is actually the game Briarbound. Like, it's not out yet. I've done like quite a bit of play testing for it, but at Big Bad Con last year, I did some play testing for it, and the groups there, I did it 3 different times with 3 different groups, and I swear the groups all played it just so well and so differently from each other that I was probably near tears at the end of each one, because I was like, oh my god,
that's awesome.
It's a game, it works, it's like everybody loved it, and I was just like, ah.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Those moments were that's just one reason why I got to go back to Big Bad Con, because just I'm like, I have to have that feeling again. But I'll be doing it with Confluence this year.
We're being raided by Timbo the Wizard. Welcome, Raiders. Happy to have you.
Raiders.
We are talking about world building tonight, and we have 4 great world builders with us. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. What were you saying, Chris?
Oh, I said that's a really great feeling, because I was doing some play testing for Mystery Flesh Pit, and having people just enjoy themselves, and it's like, yeah, it works. The 3 things I'm kind of proud of. One is mechanically for the Cypher system for this game, I made a corruption mechanic and also kind of put a lever on it where the game master kind of put the pedal to put the gas on or take the gas off on how fast the corruption works, which is something of a trick you don't usually see. Usually corruption mechanics are there and they just kind of happen when they happen. You don't feel like you have much narrative control.
Yeah.
For the Spelljammer homage game, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to do swashbuckling, versus Master and Commander. And the perfect example of that is, do you have the swashbuckler dive into the third floor to save to save their target, or do they just bomb it with rocks from a distance where nobody can fireball them? You know, those two mechanics. And I came up with, well, each place should be covered by a cocoon of hurricane winds, and you can only go in and out one spot, and you can only go so high, so you can't get out of the range of a fireball spell for those shenanigans. And that cascaded into so many other things and tweaks that that was the moment that, you know, that setting clicked. I am working on a fantasy Western, or is it a Western fantasy? But, you know, again, the elements of a Western in a fantasy setting, but not obviously a Western. Like, you'd have to kind of see what it looks like. And one of those things is, you know, there's, you know, time to travel, and the location I have, the region I have, you can be faster travel. But then I thought, what if there's these ridges and you have to go all the way around, and that really quadruples your travel time and, you know, places to be ambushed. And then what if those ridges were somehow anti-magic to some degree? And that moment, like, again, it was just a particular element that really made everything else click by expanding on those possibilities. It was like, there we go. And that probably comes from, you know, my years of trying to do science fiction or fantasy fiction. And, you know, because every one of those usually have some sort of shtick or gimmick. I mean, Brandon Sanderson's the perfect example of that, right? With his hard magic stuff he does.
Yeah. So as a writer, as a world builder, do you find yourself building lots of lists and tables, or do you take everything and build it out narratively? Because I think a lot of writers are not fans of tables and lists, but the mechanics people are, and they need them. So how do you handle that? That's like, I know it's very specific, but I think it's important to a lot of game systems. Since we're not writing novels, we're writing games, TTRPGs.
I am absolutely, like, I came like from the OSR, and today, like, I mix OSR with indie and narrative and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I really value this more gaming manual approach to world building, so it can easy to be referenced, easy to be used. So yeah, I use tables, I use lists, I use bullet points, and I try to present the setting now in a way that's more like something gameable that you can use on the table than as a word guide, you know.
Yeah.
I like tables in everything I do, pretty much.
Cool.
I have aphantasia. I don't know if you know what that is, but basically it means, so when you try and visualize something, you can like see it in your head. I can't do that. So having tables and like visual representations of the things I'm doing is very helpful, whether I'm playing an RPG or if I'm writing. I do have a lot of tables for my writing because it helps me keep characters in track. It helps me keep plot points in order. It helps keep things in my head that I might otherwise forget or might not be able to bring up in the moment because I just don't have the space in my brain to know that it's there, kind of like an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. So when everything's there, I like the tables, and I like I just, tools to help are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Tables, like, when they are necessary, are definitely good. I'm sort of so I think Matteo like mentions like writing a comic book. I write different things, and so comics, novels, games, and even behind the scenes, I'm probably going to have tables, even if it's not necessarily for the game. It's for me to kind of keep track of everything. But I think they're great for like putting in the game as well for the people that that take in information that way better.
Okay, Chris, what about you?
I'm just a fucking mess. It could be bullet points. It could be a list. It could be a little vignette. It could be a kind of a sketchy doodle, just whatever, however I see and try to process that gets on the page. It's one of the reasons why a bullet journal kind of works for me.
Yeah.
And I also discovered something magical about lists. If you keep the list to 6, 8, 10, 12, or 20 items, I see the lights going on. It can become a table.
Absolutely.
Yes,
And I've also random tables when I was like a young kid game master. I used them a little bit, but I used them the way we used them then, which was without any context. They just threw them in there, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to use a table.
Yeah.
And then now we know the reasons why. One was to do an XP grind. One was kind of a convenient way to give you a vibe on what would be kind of the ecology of the area, but they never told us that. Now I'm kind of getting back to lists more as tool. I mean, every list I make, every table I make in a game now has this sentence: roll or choose, because it's either a list for inspiration. Yeah. Back then there was no or choose. So, okay, it tells me to roll. I'll roll.
I mean, that's actually
12 years old. I don't know what else I'm doing.
That's the argument for 9-sided and 13-sided dice, things like that.
Right?
We need some of that stuff to get made. What the hell's wrong with you dice makers? We need all the weird ones.
Oh, what I'm doing now at this point with tables is I'm playing around with like the master table where you just roll all the dice and then you can choose, or depending on the severity of what's happening, you can like use the same table but with different dice. Like if it's not that hard, roll 1d6 for your results. Oh, you really screwed up? Well, now you roll a 1d20.
Yeah, you open the gates of hell, so roll a higher die on this table. Yeah.
I've seen this game someone made as like a joke called "Oops All Tables." It's just a game of just everything you do is a table with an outcome on the table, and there's just 15 tables.
Awesome. Now I want to look that up. That sounds very, very goofy and fun. Which leads to us talking about the tools of the trade, how you use it. I'm going to go to the other screen, the other page, so we can talk about them. And let me turn off that text. So I'm going to bring up some of the stuff that you guys sent me, and I want you to kind of tell me how you utilize them in the ways you do. I know, Diogo, you didn't send it, but you were showing it earlier. It looks a lot like Chris's, by the way.
Yeah.
His is much prettier. much prettier.
Let me
Do you have like dot matrix, dot grid on one side and a map on the other? Like a hex map or something?
Yeah, it has a hex map on one side and a dotted one on the other. But it has different kinds of pages. There is one with a small hex and dotted on this side. You can make like a small detail, a hex,
Hex flower, yeah.
There is isometric one with dotted on the other side too. And there's just dotted too pages. So very good. It's a world build. It's called World Builder's Notebook.
Oh, okay. I think I've seen.
Yeah, the guys who do Swordfish Island. Is that their name?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's not that expensive. It's a nice one.
Yeah.
Chris,
they had a sale a few times ago too. Yeah.
That's when I got mine.
Chris,
I bought 5, but just 2 made it to Brazil.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have up, Chris, some of your writing. You want to explain how you use it? How do you utilize it?
That seems like my whole gaming career on one page, to be honest.
Maybe it is. I don't know. We'll see when your game comes out.
We're gonna go with the far right. I know you probably can't really visualize it the way it is, but that is 3 different floor deck plans for a starship.
Okay.
Like the top, the right there in the top left, that is like the very tippy top bridge, and then there's like kind of the mid bridge, mid deck, and then the bottom is kind of the the back half of the ship and the bottom half of the ship. That was for Esper Genesis. We were putting together some deck plans, floor plans. That also it reminded me of something I didn't really notice that I noticed, and that your deck plans don't have to resemble the realistic plans for ships are, one, kind of boring, and two, don't reflect what's really the shape of the ship, because where people can go and move is a whole different space compared to all the nooks and crannies that are in an actual ship. So again, vermissitude.
Hence,
it wouldn't be totally realistic to have the ship's deck plans echo the silhouette of the ship or echo the silhouette of that deck, but doing so makes it much more for the players. And of course, 5e, that means we got a little shenanigans going on anyway, because that is like 10 feet to a hex or to a square or something on that scale, by the way. Most of your corridors are going to be 10 feet wide, which is really huge for being on a ship, but much more convenient when you're having a combat going on. And then we have that doubles those 2 pages are just 2 different settings. One is again the solar sail / spelljammer on the left, kind of like I had that little thing in the pointing at the screen, and you guys don't see what I'm pointing at. Sorry. One is kind of a solar system sort of looking kind of outlook. And since it's magic, you don't have to have circles for your planets. Mm-hmm. And actually, they weren't planets anyway. They're floating islands, is what they are in space. And again, embracing magic over science on that kind of setting. There's, instead of just having a sun, there's an anti-sun on the other side. So there's a dark sun and a fire sun. So that's kind of playing around with. Whenever I kind of use that setting, I never say outer space. I always say the void, to kind of let people know that void is not outer space. There's a difference. Yeah. And then that page in the middle gets a little bit into that Western, especially when I was thinking about using it for 5e, because with the mechanics of the way 5e works, if a wand, instead of recharging the whole wand, you could recharge like the topper to the wand. You could carry a whole bunch of wand tops for your wand, and now you've got your 6-shooter, and these are your little like speed loaders for your wand as you're doing, you're being a spell slinger.
Have you ever seen, there's this, I don't even know what to call it. It's like a live action game called Magic Quest. So it's this huge building, and you like buy like a wand, and there's different toppers that do different things.
Yes, I've heard of it. I would love to go to one of those.
Reminded me that of.
Yeah, it's like another version of Dungeon Quest or whatever. What is it? The Gen Con big live action game they do.
Yeah, I've been in that too. What is it called?
Exactly. So that explains all of that mess. Yeah. But I'm not a artist by talent. So grid paper. Actually, at this point, even on my day job, I have grid paper for my notes. It's so much more convenient to use and to turn into checklists, and just I've left college ruled paper behind. Just doesn't work for me anymore.
Something happened here. Hold on. There we are. It's funny. I was watching in Twitch and it stayed on, but on my in Streamlabs, the screen is gone. I know what screen I'm on because I have my list and I have my Stream Deck, but oh my god, this is kind of weird and freaking me out. So
anyway, for those who don't feel like they have any artistic, tent, I hope that showing you my pages lets you know you can still get cool stuff done.
Right. The reason I wanted to bring that up and then bring up this one, which is Candy's Karma City on World Anvil, I wanted people to see the difference between more traditional just pen and paper and a more, a system built for world builders, a system built for, developing your settings. Is there any, Candy, you want to walk us through this and I'll kind of follow your lead where to go?
Yeah. I decided to do the City 23 thing. I don't know if y'all heard about that late last year. Everybody was talking about doing world building and doing some every once, like throughout the weeks, right, for the year. Unfortunately, I ended up with more projects, more paid projects that I can handle. So this is sort of, I'm not getting as much done with the exactual City 23, but I do love Worldbuilding because it keeps everything together, and then you can link everything that needs to be linked. It is great. So Karma City, this is sort of the homepage you would go to on Worldbuilding, and if you scroll down, it has the World Codex.
See it.
And so basically on the back end of World Anvil, you're basically writing articles about each thing in your world. And so you can take things out. Some things you don't need. If you don't need for your world, you don't use them. But for Karma City, since it's based on Philadelphia, an alternate reality of Philadelphia, it works for me because I get to kind of do the research on Philadelphia that I need to do and put those in those articles and keep everything together with the stuff that I make up for it, right?
Yeah.
I recognize that skyline.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you click on World Atlas in the codex there.
Okay. And then Karma City or neighborhoods?
Click on, let's do neighborhoods because that's got more in it.
Okay. And then there's Mount Airy or Kensington.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's a couple of neighborhoods that I've already kind of done some research on and threw in some make-believe and some real locations.
Okay.
And so let's click on Morino Dojo.
Okay.
In Mount Airy. And so this is not a real location. This is a location that's made up, but it is set in that real sort of neighborhood in Philadelphia. And it is an actual dojo where you can learn different martial arts and things like that. And so the real nice thing about this, like I said, is you can link things to it. So on the right side, the owner is Arisu Tane. And so if you click on that, it goes to her page. Okay. And then also additional owners is going to be her husband, Randall. And so that's for me, keeping everything organized is is the best, because before, I guess, World Anvil, I had notes on a couple of different notepad programs, also in books and things like that. And so this is me trying to sort of collect everything into one thing and then be able to, get around it easily when I'm trying to, do something that's related, right? And so you can do this for, so this technically Karma City is a world Bible. It's started out as a world for a comic book, but it's also going to be for planned novels and a TTRPG, because I don't know how to stop doing projects.
When I'm looking at this, I find something very interesting. You have this long list of the NPC's traits. Did you have to create those, or are they pre-built?
No, they are pre-built, and that's one
very
of the things
nice.
that I actually had something similar in one of my notes programs. Is like when I build characters,
Love it.
For games that I'm playing in, for like even art direction. When I do characters, I go through the traits, their ages, what they're wearing, what they look like, all that stuff. And this had it all built in. And so when you do it on the back end, like it asks all these questions. And again, you can skip whatever you want to skip or whatever you need to skip. But whatever you do put in, you can actually choose to choose whether it's viewable on the page, on the article. And so if you're actually showing this to people, if there's something that you want to keep hidden, you can actually keep that hidden very easily, just a click of a button, and you're good to go. Very cool. Yeah, this is one reason why I just kind of really love this. You can do quite a bit with World Anvil, but you can also use it for campaigns. So if you're world building for just a game that you're doing, it's very easy to do it for a campaign as well, and to actually track your campaign in the on the website as well.
Nice. all right, let me go back to the main so we can chat about it. Because are there other tools that the rest of you use or love using that aren't not World Anvil, not pen and paper? Are there other tools that you use? I know spreadsheets are probably pretty common for building out tables and lists and stuff. Although you can do that in Word too, or whatever Google Sheets, what have you.
I just put everything in Google Drive, pretty much.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of folders for different projects.
I use OneNote for like quick take notes and making lists and stuff like that. But when I write, I use Google Drive, and I use like the notebooks, like to make drawings and sketch out some locations and then like this initial idea for places and things like that. But
I use anything I can get my hands on, especially at the earliest phase. So it could be a notebook, it could be Google Drive, it could be Word. Eventually it gets into Google Drive, but especially for tabletop projects, I eventually push everything into Scrivener at one point. Because Scrivener is really it's like if you could take your Google Drive and instead of trying to make 20 different windows and move things around in folders like that, it does all that for you, makes it really easy. You can or especially if you're playing with a new people, especially when it comes to like SRDs, people are like, oh, I want to have it on a website. When you cut it and paste it out of the website, there are just so many hard breaks you have to pull out. I would rather have a Word doc because I could put it in Scrivener, then chop it up in Scrivener, and then I can delete and move things around how I want. And then eventually it goes back into Word for like the final, kind of check and editing and proofreading and sending out to other people if they are also involved with the project because of track changes. I don't know. I'm speaking more to the audience here than I am my fellow professionals, but learn track changes in Word.
Yeah.
Really nice. Yeah. I can see Kenny's like, you do a lot of collaboration. So yeah. Who did what, where, and how does, and then eventually it goes into InDesign. Here's the thing, if just because I'm sure some people out there are like, well, I want to learn how to make games too, not just as a GM, but as a professional. Like when you went to college, if you went to college and you learned how to write or paint, and then you went into the real world and learned there were things like taxes and businesses, you're going to have to do the same thing if you want to get serious. Even if you think you're just a writer or just an artist, you're going to have to learn different programs to do different things like InDesign, Photoshop, or Affinity Publisher is something that's coming up now. But has not yet overtaken InDesign. What?
I use all Affinity here, like Affinity Photo, Affinity Publisher,
Because you buy it once and you're done. There's none of this, $500 of subscriptions that you're like.
As a professional designer,
I bought the second version now that they released the 2.0. I bought it because I've been using the first one since like they were like testing stuff for free, and it works and it's cheap and it's good. I recommend it if you want to try stuff. Affinity, they have like a really good trial period, and it's good stuff.
Yeah, I do design professionally outside of like game stuff. And one thing that InDesign is it is ubiquitous in the creative industry, in the creative field. The whole creative suite. I mean, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, After Effects, Premiere.
That's true.
That's what you're paying for when you pay for the suite, but it is not cheap. And Affinity Designer is a very competent layout tool. If you're on a budget, Affinity Designer is a considerable step up in quality from Word, and the leap from Affinity, if you wanted to get more pro later, the leap from Affinity to InDesign is much less than the jump from Word to Affinity.
Mm-hmm. Designing in Word.
Huh?
I said graphic design in Word.
I mean, there are templates for doing that on drive-through. Lay out things for 5e or whatever. Well, we have reached the end of the show. I don't want to keep you guys all night, so why don't we let everybody go around and say who they are again? We will go in reverse order. We'll go counterclockwise. We'll start with you, Matteo. You get to go first.
Oh, hooray! I am Matteo. You may know me as the Certified Milk Boy. You can find me on Twitter at Certified Milk Boy. I've just recently done a 3-part series with Nerds with Dice. So if you want to go see that, that's a fun romp. I'm currently making games that are in the works. You can check out Camp Cryptid version 1, which is out and free on my itch.io page. It's not that great. It's unpolished because it was just a test version. But version 2 is coming soon. If you'd like to test play that, I have a pinned post on my Twitter for signing up to be a test player on that. But yeah, that's me.
Nice. All right, Chris.
Of course, I have to, pitch my Kickstarter right now, Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. Just Google that plus Kickstarter, and you'll find it. If you don't put the Kickstarter in, you'll end up being at the website of the artist that this role-playing game is about. And yes, he is officially involved and endorses this game if anybody has any questions about that. Evidently, he has a very passionate fan base. You can also pick me up at Twitter at Chris R. Negelein, Negelein. On Twitter, you can. I have a Patreon, Ganza Gaming, Ganza Gaming, yep. And I also have the Writer's Bright Cave as a often ignored and very dusty blog going on right now.
Nice. And by the way, the Kickstarter I just dropped in chat along with your name, and I'm gonna do the same thing with Candy's. Candy, you can go ahead. The Kickstarter link is dropped in the chat too, in case anyone wants to check it out.
All right. All right. I'm Candy Williams. You can find me on Twitter at Candy_Janine, JeAnne. Also at Dicey Amazons. What am I talking about? Yes, the Kickstarter. If you are a lore and tarot nerd, check out the Alleyway Oracles Tarot, a ginormous campaign that has 3 whole new decks for y'all to enjoy. Wow. I'm working with the partner company PubGop Games on Confluence RPG, and we should be kickstarting for that next summer. But beta testing should be towards the end of the year, and so that'll be all over socials everywhere when that gets started. Yeah. And then let's see, on my Twitter is the link to my website where you can get to my itch.io for my personal games and other things that I am working on as well.
Nice. And Diogo.
Hi, I'm Diogo Nogueira. I'm the creator of Old School Publishing. I've published games such as Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells, Stronger Blades and Cosmic Spells, and currently working on Primal Quest and Cosmosaurus. You can find me at Twitter and Instagram at Diogo_Oldschool, or on Facebook at Diogo Nogueira. And you can find my games at Drive-Thru RPG, itch.io, and Exalted Funeral. Yeah.
Nice. I'm Scott Coventry, and I'm one half of Zielzaddy. This has been Story Talk. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we will see you next week when we are going to be talking about... Oh, this is an interesting one. So, difficult role-playing, playing dim, brilliant, sneaky, wimpy, amorous, evil, and other complicated characters. So it's a player night next week. It's going to be very interesting and fun. And boy, those topics get exciting. I hope you enjoyed our World Building Roundtable tonight. We have another one coming up in a couple of months. We're going to do this, I think, 3 times a year. We just gather world builders and talk about the cool things they're building. We're going to do the same. We do the same thing with game masters who are running games, and then we have our player ones coming up in between. Thank you. Have a good night, and we will see you next Sunday. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.